See, so they've got us out here thinking that we should just be thankful for everything we get and don't pay attention to what they're doing, because you should be preparing for the harder times that they've seen coming next. So instead of clocking what they're hiding, they'd have you watching boundary lines, because it's more important you concern yourself with feathering the nest. And while you're busy counting bedrooms and measuring the rest, they're embezzling from everything for treasure in their chests. And when their coffer's full of all the world's precious things, well, they'll sell whatever's left, because they know you're gonna buy it like a fat boy on a diet whose shell's full up of veg. Pre-packed, free fat food that don't provide nutrition to make sure that your health is at its best. Key-chained, free-range chicken, because the only food you can afford has been injected in its breast. And while you're scraping from a plate full up of hormones, hatred and neglect, they're taking from their basement the finest grapes a man can get. Swill it round their mouth, swill it round their mouth, swill it round their mouth. Gaze out and reflect. Ponder all the different ways that they can shape you and direct you down the path of least resistance on a wheel inside a cage that they've had prepped. And now the freedom that you crave feels so far away, the only way that you can taste it is from the fragrance on their breath that sometimes wafts across the cage from some far-off place you'll never get. And yet every day we pay for food you wouldn't even place before their pets. Yet you should fill your boots while they're sat draining grapefruit down their neck. Their lives so full of splendor, payouts, private jets, while yours is all no way out. Basic, rising debt, and a healthcare slowly starved of air till, like its patients, it's bereft, able to provide for all the different ailments rats inside a cage are like to get. Yet every day you slave away for them to take away your check, while theirs is stored away in some distant haven only they can ever get. And yet we do exactly what they say, barely complaining about the theft. And if we do, well, what to do? There are rules for me and you from which they remain exempt, and there ain't no way that we can change it. So just be patient and accept that they can raise the cost of living when it's me and you who pay the rent. And they would rather see you laying out on the pavement or living out a tent than ever dream of capping rent price to watch their pay packs take a dent. And when your local politician is 3 times more likely to own a second home than the people that they claim to represent, and 25% of those rent out those homes, when it comes to time to vote, why would they favour their consent? If they're the ones who rigged it and now sit comfortably within it, why would they change the status quo? It doesn't make no sense. And where do you think the monthly payments that they take from me and you is spent? Well, why don't you go and take a trip down Kensington or Chelsea? Go and have a look at all the properties stood empty, and then you try and tell me that the system isn't bent. It's never been an if, it's only ever been to what extent. But when you've got government officials dishing out public contracts to their friends, getting caught for it, and barely even needing to pretend, what happens then? While they're taking backhanders from lobbyists, you're forced to watch on what you spend. Left to freeze up in your living room while their gas, electricity and heating is expensed. Supplemented by your salary, they're all living happily, while your nan is forced to perish unless she's cherished by your rents. Well, I guess that's what happens when no one's held accountable for where our public money's spent. Because even when they're caught stealing from the people, all that's needed to appease us is release a little speech and that's the end. A couple weeks of looking sheepish and it ends. Never forced to face the people that their deviance affects. They should be dragged out in the street, deleted and dispensed, chained outside the House of Parliament so every single one of us can see them on the fence. Instead, somehow, they're allowed to resurrect like it was Easter and they've given up their thievery for Lent. And all that you can glean from it is consequence has a completely different meaning when it's them. I mean, you could steal $1 million as a banker without ever placing feet inside a pen, because when they're caught for it and go to court for it, and face that long arm of the law for it, they receive a light slap on the wrist and then they're free to work again. Do you never stop to wonder, how can that be the full extent? How can they fleece us all for millions, then be free for more attempts? What sort of scheme did they invent that means the laws that we're beholden to, they're somehow free to circumvent? Well, if you're really looking, it don't take long to see the reason. That same judge who went and freed them was also educated at Harrow, Westminster, or Eton, or any one of the small number of schools where all their childhoods were spent. Not to mention that the industries they work in are protected by a curtain. So when they stand up in that dock, the judge will always be more lenient because he could just as easily be them. And at the very least, they remind him of either members of his family or bear the features of his friends, released because of the breeding and the means they represent. Yet that same judge would happily give a teen 5 years or more for dealing as if his life has less of a meaning because of the place that he was born or the school that he was sent. When the very reason that he's serving up to fiends is because his family can't feed him and he refused to be the bench. From a single-parent household to the same set of prisons that his pups was in and out of. That's where the real cost of living seems to end. But where do you think the system that robs him of his freedoms and hides away his dreams so he can't see them really stems? Well, the school system that was meant to teach him, they don't have the facilities to reach him. And to try and meet his needs nowadays, it's too much of an expense. It's far easier just to move him, so that's when they remove him. And it's the pupil referral unit down the road is where he's sent. And for those of you who've spent foot inside a Prue, you know the truth. You see, these places they call schools, they're really prisons in a dress. And if you take a bird's eye view, you would see they don't want him off the streets. Because when he's forced to turn to crime nowadays, how much do you think private security companies are charging now per head for board and bed? And if he somehow manages to avoid the penal system, then it's 0-hour contracts for him or anybody like him to just stay fed. So let's be honest with ourselves. Come on. Is this not a life for which he's bred? Generational poverty and an economic monopoly making sure the vast majority will never get ahead. And so-called drip-down economics, that's just another way for them to profit from our tragic lack of knowledge on how one really butters bread. The funny thing is, it's also out of kilter. They don't even need pretend. Instead, just use the media to control what news they're feeding us, convince us that the crimes that they commit, well, they're somehow less of an offence. Because when they stole your pension, they didn't kick down your front door or climb in through your vents, pick your pocket, grab your wallet or attack you with intent. Nah. When they took your whole life savings, they used some haven in the Caymans. Also, they could pay for another grey Mercedes-Benz. But ain't it funny how you view something depending on the lens? And if you're struggling to frame up what I'm saying, let me put it in another way. The only difference between a bank robber and your man dressed in a suit is where that money's spent. You could stick up 1,000 different banks and barely make a dent. Yet it took no more than 5 city CEOs to put over half the world in debt. Yet whose line of work is somehow allowed to go relentlessly unchecked? Well, let's have a think about who each of those affects. And you can make your mind up on who the law protects, faceless corporations or the people it subjects. The funny thing is, they've actually managed to get it past us that because they're the ones in charge, they somehow have the moral high ground on all the world's events. And when it comes to right or wrong, they're the ones who set the bench. They make the laws. They have the force. They decide on what the news reports. They're down to hijack any worthy cause. And if you looked a little deeper into making us all greener, and there, of course, they are hidden at the source. And that's the only reason that these heathens are exempt. And if you can't see the truth, pray, that's because you're sucking on the Kool-Aid and are content to live your life at other poor people's expense. Happy because your house is warm and you can afford to pay your rent. Like that should be our life's extent. A couple holidays a year, a little change for you to spend. a lifetime's worth of debt for a house with a white picket fence, and then when the cost of heating creeps from 1 to 10, is that when you'll realise they've shafted you again? And what will be your mise en scène? Will you shout and cry for change? Because ain't it strange how so many people always claim that they're down to face the flames but won't even stand out in the rain and just get wet? Well, what sort of change did you expect? When they raise the cost of heating to stop their profits from decreasing, what's in their way to make them fret? When they refuse to pay the NHS, stand and clap for key workers, then refuse their 3% without ever even breaking sweat. Because there's absolutely nothing in their way they can't escape or just deflect or simply point the other way till it goes away or we forget. And that's what we get for allowing a system put in place to make us slaves until our deaths. And if you think your soggy 9 to 5 means that you're alive, I wouldn't even hold your breath. When freedom actually arrives, you won't even be there to collect. And for those of you who think the pantomime of politics means that governments and politicians are inept, have sadly failed to see the truth. You've been manoeuvred every step, because that revolving door of blunders, that's just numbers in some bigger game of chess. And I'm absolutely certain, you look behind that curtain, the Wizard of Oz is just a boardroom of execs. And that's what we get for allowing free market neoliberalism to go relentlessly unchecked. The cost of living, that's a prison we let them place around our necks. And all those billionaires you're so obsessed with, they've built their wealth up off your sweat. And while you're busy with the rat race and making sure your pay packet's the best, they're taking meetings on which of the world's natural resources they can fleece, then reinvest. While the woke and liberati are having parties around the cancelled corpses of their dead, dividing us into ever smaller sections based on sex. Every single human should be free to live unchecked, fully expressed. But focusing on the differences between us will only ever lead us to neglect. And if we spent half as much time on the real evil as we do with what's on trend, then one day we might just be able to bring the real inequality to an end. Free Palestine.